Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review of some of the biggest stories making headlines across the industry. I'm Safo. And this week, the tech world had a collective freakout over H-1B visas. Authorities dismantled a huge illicit telecom network in the New York area. And French video gamers were not too happy about an AI voice clone animating Lara Croft in the Tomb Raider franchise. We'll get into those stories and more with our guest, Maria Curi. She's tech policy reporter at Axios and joins me for a take on these stories and more. Welcome back, Maria.
Hey, Nova. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and thank you for joining us. And as always, we're going to start with our Bite of the Week. This is where we have our guest give us the number that tells us everything about the week in tech. And Maria, what's your number this week?
My number this week is 10,044. That is the number of H-1B visas that Amazon alone was able to get this year.
Well put. And that takes us right into our first story. And what can I say? Panic, confusion, freak out. How to describe what's happening in the tech industry as they digest a new $100,000 fee on H-1B visas. These are used to bring in highly skilled tech workers into the U.S. President Trump imposed the new fee on the visas last Friday. And in the last week, big tech firms have sent out advisories to workers. Some smaller firms, startups are thinking about how to raise more funds potentially to help pay for the fees and the additional costs to bring in workers. Maria, first of all, how reliant exactly is the tech industry on H-1B visas?
Very reliant. I mean, every company is applying for thousands and thousands of H-1B visas each year. And, something about this announcement, it did initially freak out a lot of the tech companies. But at the same time, these companies understand that the Trump administration has a propensity to roll out a policy, to roll out an executive order, and then kind of hash out the details after. And so we did see that be the case again with this executive order, where at first it was thought that the $100,000 fee was going to apply to all H-1B visa holders. And then it was later clarified by the White House on Sunday that it was only going to be for the new applications coming in. But that will still be impactful.
It will be impactful. And yet, in addition to that, the White House said there might also be some exceptions as well. So explain how that will work.
Yeah, so this is a part of the executive order that says at the discretion of DHS's secretary, a single H-1B visa holder, an entire company with H-1B visa holders, or an entire industry of H-1B visa holders can be exempted from this fee if it is shown that it's in the national interest to not impose this fee. It's very vague. I don't know how you define that, how you meet those requirements. I know that a lot of companies are working on figuring that out and understanding that with the White House right now. But it does seem to me to give a lot of leverage to the Trump administration and its DHS secretary to decide and pick and choose, which company may be in the national interest and which may not be.
And do we know if companies are expecting that process to unfold or become clear sometime in the near future? Do we have any kind of timeline?
No clear timeline, but this is something that all companies are actively working toward right now because it has given a lot of uncertainty to their employees. And so this is, something that they want to work out quickly.
I mean, the administration put in this fee presumably to try to encourage companies to hire within the U.S. as opposed to looking outside of the U.S. Can we find the tech workers that would be coming in on H-1B visas? Can we find those workers here?
No, there has been a worker shortage for a lot of these industries for a while now. And while we do have workers here in the US, many of them have to be trained. The STEM education pipeline needs to be bolstered, and that takes years to get the right kind of degrees and technical skills to be able to meet the demand that these companies say they need to compete on AI, on tech, and to win this global tech race that seems to be what everybody wants to do. Workforce is one area where they could be hamstrung in that effort if you can't be bringing in the talent from abroad.
No, I saw one study, and this had to do with semiconductor industry. And we've been working very hard over the last several years across administrations, Biden administration, now the Trump administration, to try to build up the semiconductor industry in the US because we saw that during COVID, that was a real weakness, having to rely on other countries across the ocean for semiconductors. In any case, one study from a major university found that the projected gap in the number of employees will need in that make up, in chip making factories is something like 4 million more workers, and we'll have a shortage of 1.4 million. Why are we so short here in the US? Why are these numbers so enormous?
In the US, we simply haven't had enough people kind of gravitate toward these STEM fields that are needed in order to meet the demand for these industries and for the semiconductor industry in particular. What's interesting about this too is that this conversation around labor and workforce shortages is coming at a time where AI is supposed to increase productivity among workers as well, and potentially, make up for some of that shortage. And so while the tech industry has freaked out about this, you also have some companies not totally freaking out. They're saying, we'll be okay still. It might be workable. And this is also coming at a time when AI technology could make their workforces not as reliant on people.
And if you are, say, a big tech firm who still needs to hire from abroad, is this $100,000 fee going to stop you?
If you're a big tech firm, it's honestly not going to be that expensive as it would be if you are a startup. For startups, this is going to really impact their bottom line and their ability to hire talent.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how that impacts the smaller business side of the tech industry. Let's move on to our next topic. And we've heard about server farms. What about SIM farms? SIM as in subscriber identity module. Yes, I had to look that up. Those little cards inside our smartphones that make them connect to networks. Well, we learned this week that authorities dismantled a network of more than 100,000 SIM cards, bunched together in clusters, stacked floor to ceiling in server rooms spread around the New York area. The authorities said this was a big threat. Why a big threat?
Well, this was kind of unfolding on the heels of UNGA and Climate Week in New York. And so
At the United Nations.
Yeah, just to back up a little bit. So these farms are essentially just big clusters of computer servers. There were about 300 of them. And then they were housing 100,000 SIMs. And the reason why this could be destructive is because you could use these types of networks to interfere calls, to eavesdrop on conversations. You have all of the world's top leaders convening in New York City, communicating with each other to be able to eavesdrop on those conversations. You can understand why that would be dangerous. And so, these could also be used to send phishing and call scams. And so that's kind of the threat that was appearing right before Climate Week this week in New York.
One statistic I saw was that the number of text messages a minute that could be sent out from these server farms that were uncovered, 30 million text messages a minute. What's the consequence of that in terms of the communication system in New York to help us kind of understand why it's a threat?
I mean, you could totally just jam up the network and you can't communicate with each other. Or imagine trying to place a 911 call during this. You wouldn't be able to because all of the servers and all of the networks would just be totally jammed up. So that was kind of the immediate concern around this. But this, as you know, started in August. This investigation started as, a follow-up to some of the threats that White House officials were facing through these calls from these servers.
They were getting like text messages and things, right? That prompted this investigation. Yes,
that's what prompted it. And so this investigation, right now, they're going through thousands and thousands of text messages and phones to get to the bottom of everyone that was involved in this. But right now, the understanding is that it is connected to an international criminal organization, potentially drug cartels. The New York Times reported that the servers were found with drugs and firearms. And so that's one potential lead right now.
And there's some conjecture that potentially a major nation could be involved as well, right? Because this would be too difficult to, fund and operate otherwise.
Yes, this is potentially coming from an international adversary.
All right, we'll see how that investigation goes. Now we're going to move on to something from our Isn't This Awkward file. This story all the way from France. It's about video game developer Aspire. spelled ASPYR for some reason. It put out the French version of a remastered set of games in the Tomb Raider franchise. Fans noticed something weird. The quote, lifeless voice emanating from the lead character, Lara Croft. And you guessed it, it was an AI clone using the voice of the French actress who previously brought the character to life. We'd like to play you a short clip from the French news channel M6 comparing the original voice actor's performance to the AI voice clone. Let's play that.
Je suis en sécurité ici, mais je dois trouver un moyen de sortir. Pour se déplacer, appuyez sur avancer, gauche ou droite.
So I don't know, Maria, can you tell the difference between the two?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, and if I were a Tomb Raiders fan, yeah, like if I were a diehard Tomb Raiders fan, I could see why that would annoy me for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the first line sounded like, a dramatic reading, in a performance. The second one sounded like somebody telling you, please exit this way off the train. So it doesn't quite work, does it? What does this tell us broadly about kind of how much of a threat the AI is right now for the creative arts?
I think that the fact that it's being done without consent and without proper guardrails does feel threatening for these voice actors. But in terms of the technology ultimately replacing them, clearly the technology is not there. And if, these gaming companies, if they want to maintain their fan bases, I think they're going to have to stick with human voices, at least until the technology evolves and there are proper guardrails, as unions have been trying to negotiate those types of arrangements.
Now, there was a lot of fan pushback over this. Were you surprised by that or not surprised?
I mean, I think if someone came after something I really was passionate about, I could have a similar reaction. Tomb Raider is not that for me, but I respect it. But yeah, people were calling it disgusting, a disgrace. I mean, people get riled up about the things they're passionate about.
There was a lot of passion involved with this. People really felt betrayed. And Aspire said there was some, quote, unauthorized AI-generated content that had made it into the game, and it's removed that material. Now, the actress involved called up her lawyer.
Yeah.
Is the company going to be on the hook here?
We'll see how that litigation plays out. We know that here in the United States, after SAG-AFTRA had some successful protesting, there are some guardrails now and some more legal precedent. But I don't know how those protections extend to France, and so we'll have to see if they're on the hook for it.
And are there gaps in these kinds of protections from unauthorized AI use in other countries as well? Are we seeing these kinds of things pop up elsewhere?
We are seeing these debates pop up elsewhere, but I think the most advanced protections have happened here in the US, and it's still pretty nascent. I think people are still looking for more and more protections, especially if you're not part of a union. What kind of protections can you get? So a lot of open questions around this still.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have more stories like this coming up. We'll have to leave it at that for today. Maria Curi from Axios, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all of you for joining us for Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Daniel Shin produced this episode. I'm Safo, and we'll see you next time. This is APM.